Good evening. I am Cynthia Elliott, President of the Rochester Board of Education. We have a couple of public hearings for charter schools. The first one is the Urban Choice Charter School, October 11th, 2022. The Education Law Subdivision 2857, Section 1, and regulations of the Commissioner of Education, 8 NYCRR Section 119.4, require the board to conduct a public hearing within 30 days of receipt of notice of an application for a new or revised charter school. The Board of Education of the Rochester City School District is conducting this public hearing regarding a proposal to renew the charter terms for Urban Choice Charter School. The purpose of this hearing is to gather community input to provide the New York State Education Department regarding the application. Urban Choice Charter School current charter term is July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2023, and serves 400 students in grades K through 8. Urban Choice Charter School is requesting their charter term to be renewed to commence July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2028. Are there any individuals to have input into this public hearing? Hearing none, this public hearing is closed. And the second charter school public hearing is the Genesee Community Charter School, again, October 11th, 2022. The Education Law Subdivision 2857, Section 1, and regulations of the Commission of Education, 8 NYCRR Section 119.4, required the board to conduct a public hearing within 30 days of receipt of notice of an application for a new or revised charter school. The Board of Education of the Rochester City School District is conducting this public hearing regarding a renewal with revisions for Genesee Community Charter School. The purpose of this hearing is to gather community input to provide to the New York State Education Department regarding the application. Genesee Community Charter School current charter term is July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2023, and serves 225 students in grades K through 6. Genesee Community Charter School is requesting their charter term to be renewed with revisions commencing July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2028. Revisions requested by this charter school is to amend its organizational chart to reflect significant changes beginning in the 23-24 school year, merge with the Board of Genesee Community Charter School, Flower City Campus, a charter school education corporation authorized by the State of New York, State University System of New York, such that when the merger is approved, the school will be authorized by SUNY beginning in the 2023-2024 school year. A determination regarding these revisions has not yet been made and is currently under review by the New York State Education Department. Is there anyone here that would wish to speak to this public hearing? Hearing none, this charter school public hearing is closed.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, October 11th, Equity and Student Achievement Committee of the Whole meeting. This evening, we're going to jump right into the agenda, which I believe is jam-packed. We're going to start by acknowledging that we have, I believe, one speaker listed for this evening. We have Mr. Don Bartolo from the community who will be addressing the board at this time. Is he on? Okay, so Mr. Bartolo is just joining us through the Zoom. He's been brought into the meeting. So Mr. Bartolo, this is Commissioner Simmons. We want to welcome you to the Equity and Student Achievement Committee meeting of the whole this evening, and we have you on the agenda to speak for 3 minutes on the topic regarding literacy. We want to welcome you again this evening, Mr. Bartolo.
Thank you.
I'll start a timer when you're ready to go.
I'm ready to go.
Okay.
My name is Don Bartolo. I live 3 blocks south of the building you're in. I watch every board meeting. I live in Rochester. 2 of my grandkids went to school here. On September 6th, I heard the board president say, "What is it going to take to turn this district around?" Her question was in response to 2 presentations. After both presentations, the president asked why there was no mention of instruction or accelerating student achievement. This got me thinking. How often does the board zero in on student achievement? On April 25th, 2019, the New York State Commissioner of Education rejected the district school improvement plan. The main reason was because the plan lacked a statement of its overarching vision for improving student achievement. The district website lists 7 committees of the Rochester Board of Education. Only one committee deals with student achievement, and you're sitting on it right now: Equity and Student Achievement. In recent months, the only evidence in the minutes related to this committee was on November 10th, 2020. President White led commissioners through a work session dedicated to reviewing the recommendations in the state monitor's academic plan. There were, however, 23 business meetings recorded during the same period of time. In order to turn the district around, I suggest establishing a district-wide culture of literacy. Every teacher from pre-K to grade 12 is a literacy teacher. Teachers learn strategies for helping students become independent readers, writers, thinkers, and speakers across all subjects and grade levels. I think the ESA committee should spend part of the meeting looking at what the Tulsa, Oklahoma public schools are doing to turn their district around. Here's a snapshot.
Mr. Bartolo?
Yes?
I'm sorry, sir. Your 3 minutes have expired. If you have additional comments that you would like to submit in writing to the board, we will welcome that at our email address.
Thank you very much. Have a good meeting.
You as well.
Thank you, Mr. Bartolo. We do look forward to the email with the information that you were looking to present this evening. We're going to move forward with the agenda at this time. And at this time, I move to review or the acceptance of the minutes from the September 13th, 2022 ESA Committee of the Whole meeting.
Motion.
May I have a second? All those in favor? We have a motion by Vice President LeBron, a second by Commissioner Patterson. None opposing? And so that carries forward. Thank you. Also, all of our board committees, we are expected, or we desire to have parent representation. And the ESA committee is no different. So I'm excited that we have a parent representative who will be joining actually has already joined the committee. I'm going to move this mic back just a little bit. Her name is Tanya Dawson. And Ms. Dawson is the proud parent of 2 RCSD graduates and the current caregiver of 2 RCSD students, one in grade kindergarten and one in the 9th grade. So she has experienced the RCSD on a spectrum, and I believe will bring a lot to the table in consideration of what parents are looking for, what her personal experience has been, and how we could better align ourselves with the needs of our families as we look to serve our students. She did join us for our Equity and Student Achievement preview meeting on September 29th, and so we do look forward to having her join us at future meetings. Unfortunately, she's not here this evening for me to welcome in person, so we will do so at the next available time. Welcome, Ms. Dawson. And with that said, I'm going to not prolong this too much. We're going to go right into the agenda. And before we get into the agenda, I see about 3 presentations, and I want to acknowledge for our viewing audience, as Mr. Bartolo just spoke and expressed, hey, he watches every meeting, and we know that we have a lot of community members that are very vested in the outcomes produced here at the Rochester City School District. And so one of those pieces are that they reach out and they want to know where materials are. And in pursuant to open meeting law, we want to make sure that we are aligned with the expectations of the law, of our policies, and our community. And so when folks are coming on, we should, by law, within 24 hours of a presentation, is my understanding, if there's going to be materials presented, we should have them available on board docs for the viewing public. Also, per policy, that would be 48 hours. If I am getting anything transposed, someone can definitely correct me, but that is what I am learning, and I want to make sure that we align with the expectations so that we have time to review materials and be efficient with what we are looking at. I will not prolong that particular conversation at this particular point. I will move on to the teaching and learning updates. And we are going to start with, it looks like attendance and chronic absenteeism. We have Dr. Shani Keelan, who is joining us at the podium to present on this information. Thank you, Dr. Keelan.
Thank you. This is close enough. Can you hear me? Is it good? Oh, no. Okay. Good evening. Thank you so much for the introduction, Commissioner Simmons, Board President Elliott, Vice President LeBron, community members, and the rest of the board, and all of colleagues that are here this evening. I'm so glad you're joining us. This presentation, originally we were going to look at chronic absenteeism and attendance again. We're going to push that into a quarterly report. So in this presentation, you'll see some updates in curriculum instruction assessment professional learning, and then we're going to keep that kind of standard through, but we do have data points that we're going to be looking at quarterly. We've established as a committee different things that will come up monthly. Some are yearly, some are semi-annual, some are beginning of year, middle of year, end of year. So just, these are our guiding principles. We want to keep everybody grounded and reminded in that every child deserves to engage with grade level content every day. Our students must engage with high-quality, culturally responsive experiences where they are affirmed, seen, and valued. And we have an obligation to provide equitable experiences to every child across the district that are not dependent on where they live or go to school. In the next slide, you'll see kind of an alignment to those guiding principles to how we're operating in teaching and learning with curriculum instruction and assessment, where the curriculum is the what, the grade level standards and programs the district has adopted aligned to grade level standards we use to instruct. And then instruction, what are the instructional strategies that engage all students, affirm all students, so they are seen, heard, and valued. And then in assessment, that we're really measuring that our curriculum and instruction is meaningful by analyzing student work and assessments with data-wise protocols to ensure we understand that students have learned and what they still need to learn. This aligns also, I know many staff members have attended Unbound Ed Standards Institute, and they come back talking about gleaming. So you'll see some of the letters in there that are highlighted in blue, or it's for the gleam, grade level, engaging, affirming, and meaningful. In the updates in curriculum, so we still, per academic plan, have some updates to do curriculum-wise in the district. It was set out in the plan 3 years ago, and we have mapped out years of which years we're adopting what grade level and what content of curriculum. So as you remember, last spring, we adopted a new science amplified curriculum adoption for K-5. There should be a K-5 mathematics RFP coming out soon. A 6-8 ELA RFP coming out soon. We have engaged in new curriculum in 6-8 math, illustrative math with Teaching Lab and Gates Foundation, and you'll hear a little bit more about that later. We do have an intervention RFP that's renewed. It was out last year, and we had to put it back out for ELA for 9-12. There is a mathematics RFP for 9th through 12th grade coming out soon, and we did adopt IXL for mathematics intervention through 9th through 12th grade. All curriculum maps, scope, and sequences have been updated for the year with some acceleration. For example, K-5 is an enhanced Engage New York with the next gen standards and accelerated to meet the needs of our students. Instruction. So big things happening here. Was good to hear our speaker tonight. We're really starting to focus on instruction when we look at CIA, curriculum instruction assessment, and professional learning. Now we're really focusing on instruction this year and what's happening in the classroom with some new protocols, right? So this protocol I'll talk about in the next slide, so I won't go deeply into it, but it gets us into every building 2 times a year to look pretty intensely at what's happening at a snapshot in a trend, like a round. Then we have innovative strategies. We have adopted Amira.com and Paper.com for unfinished learning. These are both tools that students have access, families have access to 24/7. They're not completely put out and communicated out yet. We're still negotiating some final ends of the details, but this will be a great resource for our families. And students. Mathematics department has visited all middle school math classrooms. That's in light of their teaching lab and their work with Gates Foundation. So the department has gone out and seen every single classroom in middle school. They started the first week, and they were able to gain a lot of information and a lot of data. So this really helps us think about how do we strategically support district and school initiatives together. So the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more in depth around the community learning walks. So establish in a snapshot in time, a trend report of what's happening in a building. School, district, central office folks are going out, all departments. We're aligned by network teams. So somebody on the math department is aligned to each of the 3 networks. When we arrive at the building, the principal preps us a little bit around their building, their school SIP and their SEP plan, what their big commitments and goals are, anything specific they're looking for us to look at. And then we talk about our process. So the process really is meant to be focused and strategic around supporting and collaborating so that school teams and central office teams are becoming one team and how we're looking at instruction across the district. So we're using a learning walk tool that we created as a team, but also adapted from the TNTP rubric under the 4 things you see here: culture of learning, essential content, academic ownership, and demonstration of learning. The other thing that we did very strategically as a team is created specific look-fors for the bilingual department and the special education department, not only to address needs in the consent decree, in the corrective action plan, and in the academic plan, but to really get to a point of understanding that all students in a classroom and all systems that we have in play are really important for us to look at with a tight lens to see how things are going. So what are we learning? As I typed this, there were 7 schools. We went to 2 more today. So we've been to 9 buildings, mostly high school. Today we started middle school. We started strategically with high school and middle school so that we can start to address some of the bigger areas of data that are coming up for us, not only in the graduation audit, but in the academic plan. What we're seeing is some really good trends in data around culture of learning, which is the environment for learning. Expectations, structures, routines that are set up not only in the classrooms, but in the school, that are setting students on the trajectory for success, and essential content. I know last year we presented some data and we weren't seeing people use grade level or the programs that we had adopted. I think the percent was below 30%. And so what we're seeing here so far, and I will share the data specifically at the next meeting when we can get it compiled for middle school and high school, we're looking at more than 50% in most cases of, it's a 5-point scale. We're looking at people meeting like a 3, 4, or 5 on that scale of getting that essential content in. So that's awesome. Great things are moving there. The word is out that we want grade level instruction in every classroom with grade level materials, so that's great. In academic ownership and demonstration of learning, that's where we're seeing our next push. So as we finish the walks, we come back, we debrief, we look at the data immediately with the school team, and we come up with like one lever, one pushing point that will help them accelerate their SIP or SEP goal. And in doing that, what we're seeing right now is things for us to work on, which is also part of the process. Some of the professional learning needs that we have as a district collectively that we see as trends, which would be in co-teaching, which really needs to have some work on how do we schedule, incorporate co-planning to get effective co-teaching. And then also how to leverage the use of all the adults in every classroom to maximize student learning for each child, along with the lift that we want students to own their learning, right? We want students having discourse, peer discourse, collaborative discourse, and to lift the cognitive work in the classroom and take that lift off teachers. So teachers would become more of a facilitative style, and that students would lift the work. But those are some overall trends at this point. Like I said, some real positives are principals and school teams are passionate and proud, and they are ready to share their buildings, willing and able. That's been awesome. The collaboration and the calibration that we've had, the most powerful thing that's happening is once we go in a classroom for our short period of time, we step outside, we do the tool together on every team. There's a max of 4 people, 2 to 4 people. There's always a central office staff and a school staff. And that conversation around the tool and how they complete that tool collaboratively together has been the most productive, I think, and positive conversation folks are having, because they're really calibrating around what they're seeing or not seeing in a classroom and how do we create better success for students. So on the assessments piece, this just lists where we're at. We just closed the iReady data window on Friday, and that's why we don't have the data ready. We'll have it for November. We had to extend it, and then you'll see all the other dates here. There's common formative assessments coming up. We have SAT and PSAT day coming on tomorrow. So that's a big day. And then Brilliance, Last Links, and iStation are all in process now. So a lot of data and assessments coming up. I've already explained this piece. This is just saying iReady is coming. The testing window just closed on Friday, and so we'll be prepared for this conversation in November. Professional learning, as we move forward through the curriculum instruction and assessment, we always have to align the professional learning to meet the needs of the adults that are actually servicing the students. And so one big plan we have on November 8th is it's a superintendent's conference day, is really to have teachers have time to dig into their data from their common formative assessment and actually create action plans using data-wise protocols. So the school teams in ELA and math, along with Dan Hurley's team, we're working on how do we map that out so that teachers have the time to actually do this work and create some scaffolding and differentiation for students based on the data that they have in front of them. November 3rd, planning for intervention and prevention. We have a date set aside where we want to do the same thing, like a work session with all the intervention prevention teachers, so that they come in, look at their data, and really make some decisions around the time, the frequency in which students they're servicing based on what data they see, so that we can really hone in on who needs what supports and make sure students are getting those supports based on the data and the skills they need. Letters training has started. Most everybody's had a day. We're scheduling out the day 2 now, and then day 3 and 4 is going to be May 1st and May 16th. Those are also superintendent's conference days, so it won't interfere with instructional time. Planning for summer school has already started for 2023, so that's good to see. And then planning for Leadership Summit 2023 is in the works. There is a big group of folks, not just leaders, but teacher leaders as well, that are engaged in the Mathematics Identity Leadership Accelerator, MILA project, and you might have heard of that. And that is ongoing. This Illustrative Math Gates Foundation Teaching Lab is really great work. They're analyzing student work. They're able to send student work samples in, get feedback, get scoring. And many teachers, all the teachers are engaged in it. Many send data and student work in weekly, if not more frequently. And so that's some really awesome work for us in middle school mathematics. This gives you a little rundown of what the literacy leaders are learning. They're getting pulled out for 3 hours a month, and they're getting some training to go back to their buildings and turnkey, and these are the hot topics this year. You'll see it aligns with the data we're seeing in our community learning walks, the student-centered academic instruction. Writing, scaffolding for Tier 1, those are all big things that have come up for us too as we're doing the walks and when we're seeing one learning in the classrooms. Science leaders, we have a group of folks coming in, 1 per grade level, actually K-5, to do turnkey for science instruction. And then the fall professional learning calendar has been published. And there's more, I'm sure. AMLE is coming up, and there's a group of about 25 folks going to that as well. So beyond the classroom, I wanted to share this, Rock With Your Hands, October 4th. I know some of us were there. CTE department organized over 350 RCSD students in grades 7 and 8 who attended. It was a very successful event. There were a lot of news pieces around it. In my notes, I have all the news clippings for this, so I'll make sure you get it. The 4th grade science field trips are set up for RMSC. October 25th, 26th, and 27th. All 4th graders have been invited to attend, and our science director has been busy getting that scheduled. And then the Math League is underway. And that's at Wilson Commencement, SOTA, World of Inquiry, and School Without Walls. Last but not least, a highlight, and the Rochester Education Foundation is hosting its annual Toast to Partners, Thursday, October 27th. This year, honoring one of our very own, Dr. Colleen Sadowski, the Director of School Library Systems and Media Services. So I just wanted to highlight that and share that information. Any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Keelan.
Thank you.
Before I open it up to the commissioners, I just wanted to make sure that I get this information. So in regards to attendance data and information, that I would like to see. When is that going to be available?
We're going to do a quarterly report, so November quarter should be up. Beds Day just finished out last week, was the 20th day.
Chronic absenteeism
Right, same thing.
will fall under the November timeframe. And then the iReady data, I know you captured it in here.
November.
November.
We just closed the window Friday, so it wasn't enough time to get the turnaround.
Okay, all righty. And I did have a couple of questions. I noticed that you talked about the new curriculum that's coming in a couple of spaces, and just wondering what the plan for implementation is regarding the new curriculum. We know that teachers have expressed in some cases, you know, there's this constant turnover, and then by the time they figure out, you know, how to master what it is they're delivering to students, or students get used to it, boom, there's a new curriculum. So what is the plan for this? When, how, and who? Who's implementing it? When is it going to be implemented, and how are you guys going about that?
So right now, a request for proposal is just to put a request out to see what products are out there aligned with the current standards. We have just moved into next-gen standards. And so some of our curriculum and materials, for example, Engage New York, that we've been using for K-5 math, is an older version of Engage New York that has not included next-gen. So our math team has gone out and upped that, right? They have taken our curriculum and added in all the pieces they needed to add in to make it next-gen specific, and that's what we're using right now. But it's not necessarily a career, like, I'm sure Engage New York or Eureka Math, who's the parent company, is planning on creating the curriculum that's aligned to the next-gen standards, right, for New York. And so there's going to be requests for proposals for any curriculum that we haven't adopted in previous years as a called for in our academic plan to update all older curriculum materials. So how do we do that work? Similar to what happened this year when EDEL did the whole process of doing a request for proposals, and they did all the work to decide, hey, now it's Amplify, we want Amplify. From there, the professional learning plan that comes with that is how are we training teachers, when are we training teachers, how do we do job embedded support, when does that happen, and being able to map that out. Just going for an RFP doesn't necessarily mean that we will have curriculum new in all of those places, but it is a call for proposal.
So we'll have a pulse check on that and what the
Yeah.
plans look
Yeah,
like
we'll do
as
that.
that develops. And then I noticed you talked about community learning walks, which I would love to join at some point. I want to definitely be part of that where I can and when I can. And so specific to the math piece, you recognize that there were a lot of themes that were identified during that time, and more so specific to instruction. Can you give me a handful, maybe 3 to 5 themes that you saw during instruction for math?
In mathematics instruction specific to the community learning walks, is that what you're asking?
Yes,
Okay,
like among
yeah.
the schools, what were some of the themes? Like phonics, for English, we might say the students
Yeah.
were noticing some barriers to phonics. What have you seen with math?
So we've been to high school and middle school. I will say that middle schools are most fresh in my head because I was at 2 today. All of the teachers are using the curriculum illustrative math, which is very nice to see, right? That's the breath of fresh air, that we're actually getting the right content, and it's our new curriculum that we want folks to be using. The other thing that's been very nice to see is teachers really pushing high expectations and having a culture of learning that in the room, we're going to participate and we're all going to produce what we need to do to move forward. And that's been witnessed by, doing do nows as they walk in, work time, having exit tickets out the door. They have 50 minutes, right, in a period. So how do we get the work done? Another thing that I witnessed in that was, let me quickly do my mini lesson where I'm the teacher on the stage, right, for this 10, 15 minutes. But then you're in groups working, right? And then I become the facilitator and the other teacher become the facilitator in the classroom. So those are some real positive highlights with the middle school math work that I see from this teaching lab and the teachers that we saw in the middle schools in the last couple weeks. There's a lot of work to be done, right? There's always brighter spots in different places and different things. But those are some of the things that we're seeing as what I see as a direct result to this teaching lab, Gates Foundation, and the work with illustrative math. I haven't been in all the math classrooms, so I usually pick a different content every time I go, and I go with a different team. And so I haven't been in all the high school math classrooms. We did see some great work in a few of the buildings in algebra and really pushing and teachers not giving up on kids and kids not being able to have outs that they had to demonstrate their learning and push forward. But there's work to be done. The biggest thing I think where we see work to be done is putting more work on students to talk and have discourse together to be able to produce outcomes and share that. So they talk more, they engage, and they productively struggle in the work. And that the onus is put on students to do that, and the teachers are not giving answers or like, how about this? But that students are actually productively struggling. The other thing that we've seen is when we have 2 adults or 3 adults in a room, how do we maximize that all adults are working with all students to maximize student learning? Those are some of the key things we see. And speaking to attendance, right? when we see classrooms with 10 students in it, we know not everybody's there that day, right? And so we didn't have all the attendance data and chronic absenteeism data up here for you today, but we see it every day in classrooms when we see 8, 10, 12 kids in a class, and then we pull the roster and there's supposed to be 20 or 22 or 18 students. Those students are missing. And so that's problematic too, because when the teachers move forward every day in the lesson, whatever they've missed, they're missing, and there's building on gaps.
Yeah, so I'm so excited and interested to hear how we're going, approaching chronic absenteeism here in this district. Thank you for entertaining some of my questions. I've got a ton more, but I will submit them to the question log. I want to open the floor for questions from my colleagues, and I do see Commissioner Powell.
Yes, thank you. I'm astounded by how much jargon changes over time. And on slide 10, there's a string of words, some which are very familiar, like text-based evidence writing. That all sounds very, sounds exactly like what it is, but then it's followed by the phrase, for authentic purposes. Can you explain what authentic purposes means, and how is that different from authentic writing, or I'm sorry, authentic learning?
So text-based evidence is usually used, either in nonfiction or fiction text, doesn't matter, right? For students to actually provide evidence to what they saw in the text that gives an answer to either an inferential question or some other comprehension type question. For authentic purposes would be that they're not just doing it for class, right? That they're not just doing it because it was an assignment for them that they had to produce something, but they're actually able to write text-based evidence for something, like if they had to create a letter to the superintendent or to the board president, right? That they could actually use pieces of evidence to do that for an authentic reason, to do some sort of authentic text writing.
So just to give feedback and make sure I heard you right, this is essentially so that students can be more engaged and make sure, and that they understand that there's value to the lesson being presented.
Yeah, and in the past, I think that it kind of also refers to many districts in the past would use acronyms to get students to write and respond to claims, right? They would restate, answer, add a detail. And so we wanted to move a little bit away from the normal, you're doing this because you have to do it, and this is a kind of an assignment on the New York State assessment, right? Like, this is how they want you to write. But how do you really write and get your point across without just doing it from this sort of acronym that gives you that rubric to do so?
Thank you.
Do I have any other questions? Vice President LeBron?
Just, so a question and a comment. I'm going to start with, I think the question is a little bit easier. On slide 7 for the assessments, I was just kind of looking at all the exams you all proposing on my baby in 6th grade, which will impact her for some of these. But last links, is that for bilingual students? Because then it also says never ELLs in, and then it's cut off. There's nothing there. I don't know what you guys were trying to communicate at the grade level, like tiers, so if someone could finish
So
that.
this is-
Never ELL in, what does that mean?
So when let me go back to last link, speaking and listening only. It's given grades 1 to 12 for all L students in all programming, and then never Ls in programming.
But it doesn't say, it says ELL students in all programming.
I may
and
have
never
to get
ELLs
back
in.
to you on that. I'll have to double check to see if something was specifically cut off there, and I need to scroll down, because I clicked this off of an Excel sheet. So I can double check that for you. I don't want to
Okay.
misspeak unless Dr. Plack knows more than I do on that. I can get back to you on that.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. But then also figure out a way to update this slide so that it's updated for the public if they pull it on board docs.
Sure.
Because they're not going to be able to know what was meant by that either. Just curious about the walkthroughs. I think I saw you actually come to a school to do a walkthrough. Just curious about this because I'm just trying to understand. Do you have central office staff from different departments? Are chiefs and the chief assistants involved? What's the principal and assistant principal role in doing these assessments? Because I always try to put myself in the other shoe of it, and I can't imagine being at my job and then having my supervisor come in and observe, which is fine, that's almost granted. But then my supervisor's person that they report up to, and then like other people, part of the organization that I don't work with on a day-to-day basis coming in, just trying to understand how that, like, I guess individual roles in this and what that impact could potentially have on the other end of it. For example, why aren't principals and assistant principals doing the assessment and reporting it back up to the chiefs who are then reporting it back to you all? Like, I'm trying to understand that seriously. And put yourselves in the shoes too, right? What if we started coming and observing you all in your habitat, natural habitat of employment? Just wondering, just trying to understand here, I'm not
Okay.
saying it in a judgment way. I am asking for clarification for understanding, especially if you put yourselves in the other shoe.
Yep.
I don't think it would be comfortable for me. I don't know if it would be comfortable for you. But then also trying to understand the titles and the positions that we have from a classroom teacher all the way up through central office. How many people does it require to observe and assess, and why isn't that done in a different approach?
Yeah. So I can answer that I'll take a couple bullets here. Principals are invited to bring their leadership team, so teacher leaders, teachers on assignment, principal, assistant principal, whoever they deem necessary that they would like to get on the team so that we do this in a collaborative process. Chiefs are all invited. We have had some attend. They also have their own network walkthroughs that they do that they're focusing on some of the same exact things using the TNTP rubric. In the walks, I will say most of the principals we've had are delighted to have us and super glad that they get this snapshot trend with us. For us as a team, it's been very powerful in collaborating and building relationships with the school teams. For example, today there were things we saw that weren't necessarily on the walkthrough tool, but they were things that we needed to address and we needed to be able to help the school out immediately and be able to get to. And if we're not out there doing these walks and on these day in and day out, in and out of schools, we're not gonna see and hear the things necessarily that we need to do to support. And I'm a firm believer as Chief Academic Officer that our role is to support building principals. And so I look at it as a very supportive, that's why they're named community learning walks, right? It's in the spirit of what can we as a district do that you're already doing and help accelerate what you're doing for your SIP goals and your SUP so that we can help move things forward and help build upon the relationships and the communication and collaboration that we're all speaking the same language around this TNTP core rubric, which everyone's getting, right? Principals and assistant principals have been trained in that, and they're continuing to get training in it. So are the chiefs, and they're the side of the fence central office. So it really is a community spirit, a collaborative spirit. We have good dialogue at the end too when we debrief, when we go through. The principal's left with all the notes, all the information from the Google form and a debriefing form. We do try to stay pretty specific to one high leverage move that aligns with the school's SIP or SUP and from the data that we saw, right? So a lot of times what's been coming up is this discourse, right? Getting students to have a productive struggle with the content of the curriculum in any class has been one of the key things that keeps coming up as a lever in multiple buildings, which for us says, oh, we got to do some more work on the professional learning side, right? And how do we support schools in doing that work? Hopefully that answered. I'm still.
I feel like it somewhat answers it, but on the flip side, again, I have to wonder, like, what's the role of a chief then in terms of supporting a principal and assistant principal supporting a classroom teacher, and how does that interface, I guess? And that's kind of more where I'm aligned.
Yeah.
I would just be curious to learn a little bit more further on, as you guys are collecting data, what data you're collecting versus what data would be collected from a chief doing that. Because I do agree, let me be very clear, I do believe central office should be in schools. And to be honest, I don't really even think we should have a central office. I feel like we should be dispersed throughout schools, but that's a personal opinion, just as a FYI, because I think you're right. Like, if we're not there, then we don't know, and we can't, see how we can be better supportive to the schools themselves. But I'm glad you also said that the roles is to support principals, and I just want all of us to keep that in mind when budget season is upon us. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President LeBron. Do I have any other commissioners or statements, questions? Commissioner Malloy?
Yeah, just to piggyback on what Vice President LeBron was just talking about in terms of the community walks, is there a way that you can just elaborate on the role of building leaders throughout this process? You kind of touched on that by saying that the focus was to support as needed assistant principals and principals.
Yep.
I'm curious at how these are set up. Are they evaluative in nature? Okay, so this is a voluntary, are you just showing up in the
No,
buildings?
it's not
or-
voluntary. Yeah. So no, they're all scheduled. They're all on the calendar in advance. They've been hearing about them since August 4th. They knew they were coming. They know the tool in advance. I meet with them ahead of time and we go through the schedule of which classrooms will be running and the periods will be there, who on their team is going to be on which team, and then I align our team, the CAO team. Usually we stay pretty true to content so that the content specialist on the CAO's team can be in the content that they know the best. Principal has to really just have that pre-meeting with me. All the docs are there for them. Everything gets sent in their invite, in their LinkedIn. They have a small presentation to us in the beginning, but it's not different from anything else they've already done, either for board leadership or for the beginning of the year for their staff. It's really just, we just ask them to highlight your building for us so we get to know a little bit about the building and we can feel the culture. They tell us a little bit about their SIP or SEP and commitments, and then anything specific that they really want us to know or hear or look for while we're out. That's what we get. And most principals thus far have taken a few slides from different decks and made a compilation. And we told them that. We said, we don't want you to spend a lot of time making a whole separate deck. You already have this information somewhere. It's just to give us a snapshot before we go out to the walk that we know you're building a little bit better than when we walked in the door. And then they're part of the team. So principals, they're all on the team. Every team has hopefully a central office staff and a school staff at least on it. No more than 4 on a team, hopefully at least 2. And we go out to as many buildings as many classrooms as we can, about for an hour and a half. Each time it's been around an hour and a half. And then we come back and debrief for between 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the building. Some buildings are bigger than others, and some discourse amongst the adults is better than others, and more vivacious. So, so far so good. You know, in the beginning we had some refining moments. The first week we were kind of refining the tool, and as anything, you'll notice as you start to use a tool and ask a question a certain way that doesn't give us the answer we're looking for, where there's not an option for like not seen at this time. Mm-hmm. So we've had to add a few tweaks like that, but we've taken input from the whole team to be able to do that.
Okay, I guess I'm trying to ascertain, I just visited School 34, and I'm trying to figure out, was I on a learning walk, or, you know, there were the GLEAM standards as I went through the classrooms with Chief White and with the building level administration. Was that a community learning walk that I was on then? What's the role of the chiefs in this, or would you have been part of all of those walks? Just for clarification.
So there's different walks for different purposes. I wasn't on your walk at 34 with the chiefs. I believe that was a chief network walk.
Okay.
They were part and parcel of the tool creation and had input in the tool with us. I met with them a couple times. They wanted to keep a tool separate, but much of our tool is very much the same, looking for the same types of things. But they wanted to keep it really specific to their network. What we also have on ours is that we've aligned our team. So like in the math department, one person is aligned to network 1, one is aligned to network 2, and one to network 4. Right now, I'm attending all the walks. So as I'm still building the capacity of the team to help, you know, unify the process and unify, you know, roles and responsibilities on the team, but they will eventually, people will build capacity and start being able to take on different roles.
Okay, so that's good to know. And then my final question, I guess, is just with the TNTP rubric. I know that it's the new teacher project, and I know that's faced there's been some criticism of this tool over the years. And so I'm wondering, how did we adopt this particular rubric to use on these walks? I know it's been widely criticized as being part of the Destroy Public Education movement and is financed by some really well-known billionaires. And I think it's been heavily criticized by educational advocates like Diane Ravitch. And so if someone could just clarify, because I know that we'll get some pushback
Yeah,
with just that terminology.
I'll let Dr. Black answer that because she has her hand up over there. Yeah, I'll just turn it over to Dr. Black.
Thank you.
So in order to respond to the use of the TNTP core rubric to baseline our conversations around instruction, it was not formally adopted. We are using it as a way to align all of our conversations around how we speak about instruction across multiple buildings. The reason why we're using that tool instead of Danielson is because it is a non-evaluative measure. And so we did not want to use Danielson to talk about what's happening in classrooms if we were not evaluating. And so we figured out to use a different tool. The unique perspective of the TNTP rubric, or the core rubric as it's called, positions people to look at what's happening for students. So the rubric is student-facing, so as opposed to looking at teacher actions, you're capturing a lot of information about what students are doing during the observation or the walkthrough. Again, it's non-evaluative. There are a lot of tools available out there. This one became the one that we used, again, to baseline our conversation around instruction in service of ensuring that by the time we're done this year, that all school leaders can walk into a classroom, adequately diagnose what's happening in that classroom, have shared language, and then provide a high-quality action step that moves instruction forward.
Thank you. Yeah, that's just what I wanted to make sure. I do have one other question I'm going to put on the
Okay, 'cause I have
question log.
two more folks.
I'm going to put another question just regarding assessments and a concern about our L students in particular and the number of assessments that they're expected to take. That's a common refrain that we hear from our teachers, and just want to, I'll put it on the question log.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. It would be remiss of me not to acknowledge, I believe we have Dr. Black on Zoom this evening. We also, I'm sorry, Dr. Black, Dr. Jallo on Zoom this evening. And then she's like, I'm right here. And we also have Commissioner Adams. I'm very happy to hear that you're on and well and able to join us. And I also recognize that your hand is up, I was told. So Commissioner Adams, I'm going to extend myself to you if you have a comment or question. And then Dr. Jallo.
So, apologize for being late. When I got on, it was talking about curriculum, and I'm just concerned that I be hearing nothing about ESA's approach at making curriculum. It's going to basically be costing us nothing. There's a lot of collaboration around their curriculum, building it up. And so when you start talking curriculum, and especially when we're talking about spending money on it, we need to bring that conversation up. And I know that East only is secondary school, but we need to just keep that thought in mind, because fiscally, that's what's up. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Adams. Dr. Jallo, did you have any comments or questions this evening?
Yeah, I wanted to acknowledge that I had the opportunity to attend a couple or participate in some of the learning walks. And I understand from Shani that it is still a work in progress, but it's still a great first step. My concern is with so many different people doing so many different walks, how's this data all collected and aligned to give information to people like the chiefs and principals and teachers about next steps?
I can respond to at least our piece. We share information with the team that's there. Also, the principals then are highly encouraged to share what they deem most necessary, really trying to stay focused to their SEP or SIP goal and that high leverage action step. So that's where we're at. We also share all of the information with the chiefs. So everything that we send the principal at the end of the walk, the chiefs receive that as well, and so that they're able to follow up and have conversations with the school leaders.
Thank you. Any other questions, President Elliott?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Kalin. Okay, next on the agenda, we have a presentation around receivership. an overview around receivership, data and progress, and we're going to have Chief Demario Strickland join us at the podium. Thank you.
So as you're getting that large packet, please allow grace, as there's so many different terms that we've been learning over the past 10 years in terms of receivership. So good evening, Madam Chair Simmons, President Elliott, and Vice President LeBron, and Board Commissioners. I bring you greetings from the Office of School Chiefs, here to do a presentation on all things receivership. Normally, Chief Morian would also be up here with me doing this receivership presentation, but she is away at a professional development opportunity, so you get me. All right. So as you can see, up here we have our vision and mission of the RCSD, and I will highlight this. I did not hear it in our previous conversation, so we need to be making sure that we're grounded in this work. So we ensure all students have equitable access to high-quality education and graduate each student as a productive member of society. And then our mission is foster students' individual talents and abilities in a nurturing environment. Oh, and I'm sorry about the the last word. Guiding principles for our CSD, so these are starting to be prevalent in multiple presentations, so I won't reiterate them. They were also brought up in the previous presentation. So here we have multiple ESA accountability standards. So ESA is Every Student Succeeds Act, and this was brought into legislation under our previous president, Barack Obama. And under his legislation, we have a few different qualities of schools. So first, and this is a big learn to continue to foster this best district in the world from President Elliott, and that's trying to get our schools to become recognition schools. We do have good standing schools, targeted support and improvement schools, also known as TSI, comprehensive support and improvement schools, known as CSI, and then we have our comprehensive support and improvement receivership schools, which is CSIR. So what is receivership? So it is monitored under Every Student Succeeds Act, and it's a subsection of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965. Schools were originally designated as struggling or persistently struggling under No Child Left Behind. So you will notice that our cohort 1 schools actually came from our persistently struggling and our struggling schools under No Child Left Behind. And those were originally identified as 5 or more years of low academic outcomes, and persistently struggling was actually 10 or more years of low academic outcomes. When identifying metrics, the way we get receivership schools is we're looking at the 5% of the lowest performing schools in all of New York State. So we're putting all the schools in a bucket, and basically, if you're falling in that lowest 5%, you would be designated as a CSI school, and ultimately a receivership school if it's over 2 or more years. To date, there has only been 2 cohorts of receivership schools identified in New York State. Now, I will say some of the information is getting kind of confusing, because last Thursday, and I had already had the presentation complete, New York State had a webinar for us in which they were talking about how new schools are going to be getting out of receivership. As we continue to dissect that information, because it was very heavy, then I'm sure we'll come before you again to talk about what those new accountability measures are. Several. Oh. You just go ahead.
Okay, we're just having some technical difficulties. You got it? Okay.
Thank you. Here are our schools that are currently in receivership in RCSD. So we have cohort 2 schools, school 10, 16, 19, 28, 33, Joseph C. Wilson Foundation Academy. That's Principal Scott, so I hope it's not important. I mean, hope it's not serious. That was him calling, sorry. And then we have our high schools, which is Edison, Jason Monroe, Northeast, and then we have East, Lower, and Upper, which were a part of cohort 1 schools. We have Rise School, which is under an independent monitor. So it was likely that they were identified as receivership and did not make demonstrable progress, which is why they were ultimately told to close and start over, and then there was an independent monitor put into place to monitor the improvements of the school going forward. And then we have Leadership Academy for Young Men, which was a cohort 2 school, but we chose to end that school last year. So we have a theory of action for receivership, and it is worth going sort of bullet by bullet, and I apologize for the faintness of the text. But we truly believe, myself and Chief Morian, that if we provide excellent instruction with rigorous and data-driven, have shared and individualized priorities, align resources with our priorities, align professional development to priorities, attract and develop a talented and diverse workforce, have priority in staffing buildings, have aligned central office department supports, and expand in opportunities for students, engage in continuous improvement and performance, in which we set high standards, evaluate based on those standards, collect evaluation information, and provide support based on that data, then we will ensure positive student outcomes for every child. They will be college and career ready, and there will be no receivership schools within Rochester City School District. So the ultimate goal, of course, is that we have no receivership schools, and that's the overall goal. Now, there's multiple layers in the accountability system. So this is when things get too heavy. I did provide some small definitions that are attached to it so that we get some basic understanding, and then I will elaborate if you have questions at the end, if I can. Student academic achievement is something that is looked at for all schools, and we're looking at measures on state tests and Regents assessments for ELA math and science. So that's from grades 3 through 12. We're looking at student growth. So it's not just about how students do, but we're looking at, are students able to go from one level to the next, from 1 year to the next? Of course, we want to see proficiency, and I know we've been sort of bringing up these things in our board leadership meetings. We want to see proficiency, but the big thing also is to make sure that students are not just staying a 2, they're actually being able to move to a medium 2 or a higher 2 and pushing those students over to 3s. So what progress is being made in that regard? We're looking at academic progress, which is all schools, and there's measures of overall student progress on state and Regents assessments against the school's long-term goals and measures of interim progress. Measures of interim progress are called MIPS, And those are goals that are provided from the State Education Department in which a school needs to reach, exceed, hopefully, in order to show that they're capable of becoming a school that's not CSI, which is ultimately the overall goal. We're looking at English language proficiency. This is measured in all schools. So we're measuring the progress of English language learners in meeting individual progress targets on assessment. So there are also goals for our English language learners that need to be met while they're taking these NISA testing every single year. So we want to see that they're moving from one level of their English knowledge or their English acquisition to another level or higher or least restrictive, which is why we do things like the Lost Links, because that speaking and listening portion that Lost Links covers, that should give you an indicator of how students are going to do on the NISA slot exam. Next, we have chronic absenteeism. This is a biggie, which we all know there's a lot of controversy over it. It's measured in all schools, measures the percentage of students who miss 10% or more of the days they were supposed to attend school. So we're talking New York State, 180 days at least, so any student that meets or that misses more than 18 days is considered chronically absent. Looking at graduation rates for our high schools, measures of the rate of graduation for individual cohorts of students who first entered grades 9, and we're looking at 4th, 5th, and 6th years averages. And finally, college, career, and civic readiness. That's for our high schools, and it measures the percentage of students who achieve various types of diplomas and credentials, and the degree to which students enroll and succeed in advanced courses or career and technical education programs. So we want to see more of those students taking AP courses. We want to see them participating in CTE courses and earning additional seals, including the Seal of Biliteracy, Seal of Civic Readiness. Those are all of the things that help schools earn more points in those areas so that they are able to show progress. And again, ultimately, we're thinking about getting out of CSI status. You know, you need more students taking APs. And I'll kind of go into it a little bit more about the things that we can do to be successful. So we have some charts that assist, that help establish the scores, but these are sort of going away as of Thursday. And it's going to be very interesting how the state measures. And again, please let me bring that back to you because we really were getting the information thrown at us on last Thursday, and I don't want to give you anything accurate. But regardless, each of those areas, which I had already explained in the previous slides, they're ranked. So basically, you know, if you get in that level 1 range, you can see at the top left-hand corner, you have 0 to 10% statewide, 10 to 50, 50 to 75. Sorry, that's me. Oh. Level 4 is showing greater than 75. Those levels are established, and that's helping schools get identified as CSI. So schools with a high amount of level 1s are likely to fall into a CSI status. And if this is multiple years in a row, it is very likely that the Commissioner of Education would place that school in receivership. Okay? So there's different charts for different measures. And again, this is just the intricate piece, and at times very difficult to understand. You really have to study this stuff. Here are some metrics that are taken into account. Each year we get a report from NICED in which they literally break down composite performance, so what I had already brought up in terms of ELA, math, and science. They look at the growth. I'd say growth is just as important as how many students are showing that they're proficient. We're looking at combined scores of growth and composite scores. and then also English language proficiency. So if you see in the first column, that's the goal that was set. And that's not the goal that was set. That's what was attained at the school level. And then you see they ranked those numbers. They gave this one, and I'm looking at the bottom right-hand corner. So it was a 0.86 when they did all their fancy calculations. That fell into a level 2 range, and they just show that, I mean, it's 0.86. So on that scale, which I had showed in the previous slide, you see the success ratios, for instance, that determined that for ELLs, they were at a level 2. Here's some additional metrics. The top most controversial, again, chronic absenteeism, especially since we have situations that are connected with COVID. And, you know, we see that a lot of our receivership schools are actually those schools that are identified as having a high number of chronically absent students in their schools. Now, making demonstrable progress. So every year, schools are given a number, a percentage, and that percentage is based off of indicators. So we have level 1 indicators, which are provided to receivership schools, and that is worth 50 points. And then there's level 2 indicators, which are indicators that a school may select that they say they're confident that they can beat these scores and earn their points towards making demonstrable progress. So when you take 50 points plus 50 points, you get 100 points. The total, the golden number, is 67. If you get 67 points or greater, then you've made demonstrable improvement, okay? You've made demonstrable improvement. If you, when adding those points up, score below 40 points, you have not made demonstrable improvement, and there's likely that you would become, you would likely be taken over by an independent monitor or forced to close, period. If a school is between 40 and 66 points, the commissioner looks at all of the different metrics, they look at all the different state visits that we've had, and they determine if we are going to say, yes, they made demonstrable improvement. This is why information sharing in our continuation plans and quarterly reports that all receivership staffs have to complete are very important, because when you're looking at, okay, there's some certain circumstances that schools have been explaining within their reports, the commissioner uses that information. They'll say, yes, you know what? I know that they've done well enough to continue on in just regular receivership. They don't need to be taken over. Here's an example of a school that met their demonstrable indicators, and for all intents and purposes, I did not use an RCSD school just for the sakeness of this, but this is a 92% demonstrable indicator performance in which they made DIs and they will not be closed. They will be able to continue. And then we have the next one. So if you look at this percentage came up to 63%. So what happens is you look at the level 1 indicators, and it usually ends with grade 4 and 8 science, all students level 3 and above. That's, so they have 6 indicators likely in their level 1s. So we're looking at 6 divided by, or 50 divided by 6. That's going to determine how much points each of those indicators are worth. And then you see on the bottom, they have 5 indicators, so it's likely they only chose 5 indicators that they know they would pass, and those are going to be worth 10 points. The commissioner, when you add up everything that they have check marks on, it shows that they only got 63%. So this had to likely go to the commissioner, which I'm sure it did, And she, based off of the information that she's gathered through visits, quarterly reports, so on and so forth, determined that this school has made demonstrable progress. And they therefore don't need an independent monitor. Here are some unfamiliar misconceptions, but also some could be familiar. I just thought about that. This is very important because it is very, very common. Making demonstrable improvement indicators does not mean that you get out of receivership. So often, we've had to do a lot of work with principals to say, I'm very happy that you're making your indicators. I'm very happy about that. However, that's just to continue to push you along the way, to continue to stride and make improvements. But ultimately, we need you to get out of CSI status. That means that bottom of the barrel, that 5% or less, needs to come up so that we can elevate you out of CSI status. That is the only way that that will happen. Making your demonstrable improvement indicators helps the school from not being taken over by an independent monitor or ultimately closing. Okay? There are situations in which proficiency rates of receivership schools exceed some of our schools in good standing. So that's because, remember, I tell you, they're also looking at growth, and maybe that school in good standing just has students that are proficient, but their growth might not be there as well. But, there's a lot of different scenarios, but you have to look at everything as a whole. Chronic absenteeism really played a big part into this as well. That really can knock someone into a CSI status. And I have to put it out there for our hardworking receivership schools. Bad teaching and leadership happens at receivership schools. That misconception has to go. That is not true. We are talking about these schools are putting their heart and soul into lifting the voices and education of our students. And I will up here publicly say that we definitely are proud of the work that they do each and every single day. Here's the support that New York State Education Department gives. So with being receivership, they're not just saying, hey, you're receivership and we're not going to do anything to support you, which is fortunate. They award CSI receivership schools $200,000 in 1003 basic funds and $250,000 this year in 1003 targeted funds. These are Title I funds that could be used towards programmatic approaches, certain staff or personnel, these individuals that will help overall school programming and ultimately meet their demonstrable indicators. They are also, schools are provided a school support partner, which is an educational expert that's from the outside that gives a different lens or look based off of their thoughts of the school. And they work with that principal very closely to ensure that they are providing support. It's just another person that the principal can rely on, which they really need. And we also have visits from the Office of Innovation and School Reform, which is led by Dr. Ray Giammartino. And these visits include presentations from administration on their progress of the demonstrable indicators, discussion regarding continuation plans or their receivership reports, walkthroughs of classrooms, debriefs, and next steps. So that is a collaboration between their offices and ours. What has to be different at receivership schools, and I'm almost finished. We have to provide an equitable continuum of serving students with disabilities across our district. You'll notice that a lot of our receivership schools, our students with disabilities numbers exceed the district average of 20%. We need to completely utilize the powers of the receiver. So under this, that means, there's a host of rules, which is on the last slide, or the second last slide of the presentation, on the MOA between the RTA and the district. those powers have to be used because that's the best way that we're going to get these schools running and out of receivership. We need to have priority staffing and filling vacancies. That was a lot better this year with really making sure that we get teachers in front of students. Now we really need to make sure they're highly qualified teachers and staff that are teaching our students. And we need to provide multiple opportunities to address opportunity gaps with our students. You all have graciously done things like put through night school programs so that we really can make sure we give students the extra opportunities to earn credits, mark and period recovery, so on and so forth. So a lot of those things are happening through the actions of this board. So thank you for that. And ultimately, and this is it, what needs to be done to get schools out of receivership? So we need grade level teaching and curriculum in all facets. Laser focus on students writing across the content areas. When we start digging deep into student data, which is like, that's something I just love, we're noticing that students are coming up short from meeting proficiency because they're not writing. They're choosing not to write on the state assessment. And those are like points that, add up. And if you don't answer multiple responses, then you're likely not to get a 3 or a 4. Increase opportunities for student engagement in our classrooms. I know this is very hard. This is very difficult for teachers, and myself as a teacher, I would do it. The minute you allow students to talk, you have to give up some of that control, and that's uncomfortable a lot of times for our staff, and we acknowledge that, but we have to learn and practice that so that our students can have educational discourse with each other and start building their own knowledge as they go through the curriculum. We need to increase the number of provided opportunities for students taking and passing AP courses. So I know that we were online, myself and Dr. Jallo were on a state call thinking about some fun things we can do at Edison in the AP world for freshmen. You know what I mean, next year. So we want to start getting these experiences to our freshmen early so that they are able to be college and career ready. Increase the number of students that earn syllabi literacy, CTE credentials, and civic readiness. We need to stabilize enrollment at testing levels in grades 3 through 8, and also stabilize cohorts at high schools in receivership, which is very difficult because those are generally the spaces that are available. But if students continuously come in, then it's almost hard to have a stable culture in which we can really focus on those students to get them to the finish line. Thorough scrubs of student academic transcripts for focused graduation planning, increase the number of students earning 5 or more credits, and at least one Regents exam by the end of 9th grade. So Edison, Northeast, Monroe doing really good things with honing in on our 9th graders. Because they know if they get students to that level at that point, they will have a better chance at graduating. Focus on kids getting to school and finding out the why of why they're not there. Let's not make assumptions. We do that a lot, and that's not cool. But what do we need to do to meet the families halfway to say, hey, what do you need extra from us so that we get you to school, or, we get you to school. And then finally, use MTSS in the problem-solving meetings to diagnose the needs of learners and increase the focus on what teachers must do in order for students to be successful. And then finally, I won't read this off, but this is the MOA between the Rochester Teachers Association and the district that it must be followed for the schools that are in receivership. And those are extenuating pieces outside of the contract. A lot of things, if we choose to have additional meetings or so on and so forth to engage the staff, we have to compensate for them. But those give all the rules in that regard. So with that being said, I know it's a mouthful, and listen, my mouth is dry, and I apologize. Please, questions?
We have some water for you right there. Dr. Keelan, would you like some water? 'Cause you were up here for a minute yourself. Thank you for that in-depth presentation around receivership schools and what it actually takes to get out of receivership. And it's much more complex than I thought I understood. So that was really good to hear and learn a little more about. And I'm looking forward to some information that will give us at some point a pulse on how we are progressing in those pieces.
Sure.
So not just the, as you said, the indicators, but also that key piece, the CSI status, like what our schools are doing. Something that would not necessarily, not an Encyclopedia Britannica, but something like a snapshot or dashboard that just says, hey, this is where we are in some of these categories, and I'm sure that would take some time. But
No, well, quarterly reports are due to New York State, I believe, on October 28th. Those go through a series of things. They go through the community engagement team, which are at receivership schools. I review them, or Chief Morian reviews them, then Dr. Black, and then Dr. Peluso will review them and sign off. But then we will have a preliminary snapshot of where schools feel they are right now. And that information, I mean, you're talking not even the first week of November, we can have that available.
okay, well,
And
that,
it has to be posted by law. So you
Yes.
could also go on there and see.
okay. Get that alert. My computer's restarting, so that sucks. Vice President LeBron has been saying, why don't you switch? And I'm like, no, it's coming. It's 90% on, but I still have my questions. Slide number 7, you were talking about a lot of priorities that you identified, and I'm curious to know how they may align with some of the things that we already have outlined in our academic plan, the priorities that you said, hey, we feel that if we identify priorities in these spaces, that we can start to make some changes. And so how are you aligning and identifying the priorities, and how are they in alignment with the academic plan, if that makes sense?
It does. So, of course, Dr. Jallo's academic plan outlines, it's like a roadmap of the things we need to do to show that we are a district looking for continuous improvement. So when I talk about priorities, we've done a lot of work with DataWise and the Office of Innovation, and bringing that to all of the principals. And we are coming up with commitments around math priorities, ELA priorities, what is going to be their commitment to this data-wise problem-solving practice, and also graduation priorities. So when we're looking at those, we're aligning those priorities, and one of the things, when I go into a building, I'm asking a principal, what are you saying to be true in every single classroom in this school? And when I go into every single classroom, I'm looking to see that and provide feedback. And most times, those priorities are aligned to what they've come up with, or they said that they're going to identify as their problem of practice, like what are teachers possibly falling short from, what do they need to get better with, and ultimately, when we do that, it's going to determine if students actually improve their academic outcomes.
Thank you. And then I just have one last statement on 2 pieces. One, just recognizing what you talked about with the students not wanting to write in certain spaces, which is historically the issue, which we know the underlining piece is literacy.
Yes.
You know, and I've been around students for so long, and just even essays where they could take advantage of scholarships, not wanting to write.
Yeah.
And it's heart-breaking. So that literacy piece is strong. And then lastly, just lifting you for lifting the schools and recognizing that a lot of schools that are in receivership are hardworking, and it's not always what we may jump to the conclusion around, but they're working hard, and there's other structural deficits that play into why schools may find themselves in receivership, things that are sometimes outside of their control. But we're going to work on the things that are within our control. So I'm going to get off my mouthpiece at this time. I'm going to start and jump to the Zoom and ask Dr. Jallo or Commissioner Adams if they have any statements or questions. And hearing none at...
I do.
Okay.
I do, actually. So what is the district's goal for receivership schools this year?
So, Dr. Jallo, that's a great question. And I will look forward to talking to you about the specifics around that goal, honestly. And no, I'm not going to come up here and say any old kind of thing. But ultimately is that every school is lifted from CSI status. We're finding out at the end of this school year, there's going to be a slightly different measure which could make it simpler to get out of receivership. If we just really look at, for our high schools, the 4, 5, and 6 years, and then the state is actually talking about comparing what a number was, and I can't even quote it because, again, it's not embedded in my brain, but I believe it's around core and weighted performance, and what it was when they went in receivership and what it is when at the end of the school year. And if you're a cohort 1 school and that number is shown an increase, then they will lift your receivership status. But again, I want to be accurate in that information. It was, again, a lot of information thrown at us. But ultimately is to make sure that our schools really aim for that 67% graduation rate, and that we also show at least a 5% increase on our state assessments for 3 through 8 ELA.
So let me say why I asked the question.
Yes,
When schools and districts try to turn around, one of the things that they usually do is they have a very simple, explicit, understood goal that everybody is working towards. And if that's not clearly stated, it's hard to turn a school around without everybody on board understanding that. My other question is, I too, like I said, I've been on some of these learning walks, and I've made an effort to try to go to the ones that were in receivership schools. And there are many, many people working very hard, but there is still a lot of work to be done. And so, I'm wondering, the walks that were described earlier, is that information helping you with the receivership schools? And then part 2, the schools are working hard, but what about the district? Because the district was cited in the last 2 years for not doing enough for receivership schools. The receivership schools are doing a lot for themselves. But what plans or initiatives are afoot specifically for receivership schools to no longer be receivership?
I would say the information from the community learning walks so far has been affirming to my noticings when I actually go into the schools every other week. So, that's information that I take, and myself and my project implementation specialist really dig deep and look at root causes and what are we going to do to support the schools, and how do we get fellow departments on board. That's ultimately, it's like it has to be a collaborative effort when we're talking about all this. And Dr. Jallo, what was the latter part of your thought?
To disaggregate, the work that you're doing is one thing. The work that the school is doing for themselves has been acknowledged, and I would also second that acknowledgement. But can you speak a little bit to what the district is doing specifically to support receivership schools at the district level? And maybe that question is not for you alone.
Yes.
It's not for you alone.
Right. I think that, Dr. Jallo, thank you for the question. I do think we have to look at how we staff and hire for those buildings to make sure that they are a priority from the district standpoint, right? And also taking a look at, do we look at our extended learning time and how we're adding additional time to certain schools as well, and make sure that we're supporting them funding-wise? Those are things that were done previously that have fallen by the wayside the last few years that are going to have to be reinstated to kind of support our receivership schools moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Commissioner Adams still on? Okay. So Commissioner Malloy?
Thank you. Chief Strickland, first and foremost, thank you so much for this presentation. There is so much to digest here.
It is.
So it's going to take a while, and my computer is now up and running finally, but it was updating for quite some time. So I may have missed this. Quick question. Can you just tell the public and the board just the difference between the two cohorts? You have cohort 1, cohort 2. Just for clarification, if I missed that, I apologize.
No, you're great. So cohort 1 was identified as, that was during the transition from No Child Left Behind to Every Student Succeeds Act.
Okay.
So initially, any school that was designated priority, and then identified as struggling or persistently struggling, those were schools that transitioned into receivership, okay? Then we had the review that has to take place every 4 years, and then you had some schools exit receivership out of 2019, and then a new cohort came on in 2019.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
And that's cohort 2.
And then just finally, I just really want to say I love the idea of some of the recommendations, including the pre-AP type programming for ninth
Yes.
graders. So thank you so
I
much.
think we tend to focus on the deficit, and we have to really stop that, but what are we also doing to accelerate our students? Because they're smart and capable of doing great things.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I'm going to move on down the line. You know, you mentioned that there's something that makes it a little easier potentially that to kind of simplify how you go about getting out of receivership,
Yes.
what have you. And correct me, because I could be wrong, but my understanding is when schools go into receivership, there's additional resources that are poured into school communities, as well as funding dollars and things
Yep.
of that nature.
Yes.
So coming out of receivership, I'm not sure if you would have that answer or who in here could answer this, but like, what is the financial ramifications? We want to see our students succeed, so if there's financial ramifications, so be it. But what would they look like?
So if I were coming out of receivership for I made it, yay, we're in 2022. If I were coming out of receivership at the end of the school year 2023, I would have likely known towards the end of the school year last year. And then the funding kind of continues for that last year to really make sure you have the capacity in place to continue to move forward. It's not just a cutoff, but then it's up to, the district to make sure that we continue to provide equitable support for those schools in particular, because a lot of times schools become good standing, get out of receivership, and then resources are snatched away. We're going back down the same path again. So that's what we're trying to avoid. But it's not just a quick cutoff. It usually does extend to the end of the school year.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Chief Strickland. Vice President LeBron?
I'm like, yep, I have. So two things. One, you just talked about walkthroughs. I just have to say, piggyback even on what Dr. Jallo mentioned earlier, I'm like, we have another walkthrough, and how is that aligned with what, because we do walkthroughs too, when we go to schools on Wednesdays as board leadership, we meet at different schools.
Yes.
I just am wondering how many walkthroughs are actually happening in the schools, by whom, how often. I think I would like to understand that, and I don't know if you have I don't think you will have an answer right now. Let me be clear. I'm okay with that going into like the board question log to get, but I would like to understand how many folks are doing walkthroughs on a monthly basis, what teams, departments, state, district do they belong to, including us. Like I said, we typically try to do at least once a week as we do the board leadership.
Yes.
So that's a question for the board question log and an answer at a later date. See Dr. Black shaking her head. She might have an answer right now. You can answer on record. I want to make sure it's accurate, but go ahead, Dr. Black, if you have an answer.
We'll add it to the question log. Yep, we'll answer the question.
Okay. She was shaking her head, she knew, I just want to make sure. But the other thing I do want to go back to what Dr. Peluso was just mentioning is this funding piece, right? And what the budget looks like. And we don't necessarily have like this really true equitable way of how schools are funded. Like this has come up multiple times. I feel like we have a general census, like if there's an X amount of students, there's an expectation to have X amount of teachers and staff, but other than those things, I don't think we've pinpointed to say this area, there's a deficit of music, and so so I would like us to figure out as we move forward how these conversations are taking shape and form. And then that Title I dollars that are given to receivership schools are not the only way that they're funded, because as they get out of receivership, they lose that funding. And so there's a reliancy that happens for those schools to depend on those supports and resources, and then we pull them away. You're in good standing, we pull them away, but they're in good standing because of some of the efforts, and including the financial additional resources that came in that may look like an additional coach or a support person or a literacy person. So I would like us to have those conversations as we move forward into budget season soon. And then in addition to that, President Elliott has mentioned this, and I've gone to a few schools that are in good standing, is that next level beyond good standing. Because I will tell you, in my time on this school board, we don't, in my opinion and my experience in the last 5 years, we've actually never sat down to have a conversation of what it's going to take a school in good standing to recognition blue ribbon, not just academically, but financially what that looks like for that school. And I do believe we have a number of schools that are at that cusp, if you will, and that have the dedication and the will to want to move to that next level. But we have to be intentional about that. And I think that when we do things like that, that's another way to attract students back into the district versus just saying we're just going to attract students back into the district, because that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean, it means zero, absolutely nothing. So just want to put that out there as we move forward, that recognition school status for a number of our schools in good standing is where I would love for us to start moving towards, and then looking at how do we fund through general funds the supports and resources needed for the receivership, and remove our own reliancy on Title I for these schools. I'm not saying that we don't take the Title I funding for them, but that can't be the primary extra additional supports of funding streams for schools in receivership. It has to come from our general budget and how we manage that. And I have to say this now on record, and I'll keep repeating this. Some of this is tough conversations around school closures and mergers so that we can align the resources, and I get it, but we have to be very transparent about those decisions and how we make them and why we're making them. And I know that we're going to have a process for it, but all of this ties into one another. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President LeBron. President Elliott?
Thank you, Chairwoman Simmons. My question has to do with the metrics, and I'm looking at them. And so what period were these metrics determined? What period of time? Is this over the year before and the 2021?
You're talking, can you?
Page 14 and 15?
Got you. Page 14 and 15. These were metrics that came out pre-COVID. So pre-COVID was the last year that we actually, the state gave a demonstrable improvement rating. So 2019-20, there was no rating given. And 2021, no rating given. 21-22, that's where we are now. They're going to give a rating, but they're not making determinations on if schools get out of receivership or not based off of those ratings. So they will give it, but it's just sort of FYI.
Okay, so we're not expecting any schools to get out of receivership at this time. Correct. Do we anticipate that we have schools that will be entering into receivership? That
I don't know, because the state is still identifying what that is going to look at. When they were meeting with us, and Dr. Peluso, correct me if I'm wrong, they were still flushing out some of the details. And they presented, I thought, decently in terms of what we are going to do to get out. Some questions around secondary, which I have to follow up with. But for elementary, it was kind of clear. But that was one thing that we do know, no determinations would be made to take anyone out right now or bring anyone in as of now. Does that answer your question?
It does,
President
thank you.
Elliott? Yep. No problem.
Forgive me. Commissioner Powell.
Thank you. We all received a handout, quarter-inch thick, if it's a millimeter. It describes 2019-2020 accountability status based on 2018-19 results. Is there been an update to this that you're referring to, or?
There has been, I don't think there has been an update to this.
Okay.
But I will say the definitions are standard, so now we are in a groove, like if you were to say, hey, Strickland, can you calculate the weighted performance index for this school? I know exactly what to do, and this is a big, huge guide. It's a huge help for helping you understand the state jargon, the mathematical equations that seem, beyond algebra. But we have that information here to help us calculate or get an understanding of how metrics are calculated.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I'm certain that there's a version of this on the New York State website. Would you be able to just send us all a link to that so that I don't have to keep track of the paper?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's all.
Okay. And Commissioner Patterson, did you have any questions or comments?
No, thank you.
Okay. And looks like we're clear on the thing. So Chief Strickland, thank you so much for your presentation this evening.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay, looks like we have one more presentation for this evening. And I'm just bringing this up. Here we go. So it looks like we're going to talk about the comprehensive summer school report. And this is in alignment with an expectation from our academic plan, I believe. Is that correct, Ms. Nguyen?
Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Jallo. So in alignment with an expectation from our academic plan, comprehensive summer school report. Thank you. Mr. Hurley.
All right, good evening, commissioners. My name is Dan Hurley, the Executive Director of School Innovation. Can you just a little higher? I just wanted to take the time tonight to review some of the data that we've received around summer 2022. Again, this is a high-level kind of look. There's a deeper report. We have about a 70-page report going. There's more to be added to it that hasn't been calculated just yet as we wait for those iReady scores that just finished that window. But I just wanted to share that. So the data tonight is not like highlights, it's not lowlights, it's the actual information that we're going to use in our continuous improvement process to always improve the way we serve students and families. I got the clicker? All right. So just wanted to take a second to acknowledge the Summer of Discovery theme that we created this year. So we are part of a national group called District Summer Learning Network. It's about 77 districts from across the country. And we're in year 2 of a 3-year collaboration. So we have professional learning for our central office staff. We have a coach who works with us for 5 hours each month. And this is all funded by the Wallace Foundation. And so working with them last year, we identified 3 priority areas: engaging instruction, connecting with students and families, and accelerated learning opportunities. So those are kind of our 3 focus areas that are going to stick with us for a few years. So vision for the summer of 2022, I'm not going to read that to you, but I do want to point out that in the vision for summer learning, we do have all students listed there. Now, sometimes we have programs, and I think you'll see in the summers to come, we'll have programs, we have iReady data that might say, okay, so if we have a student who's 2 grade levels behind in reading, then we're going to invite that student to reading boot camp for summer. But all students means opportunities for all students. So it's not just what we as a district are providing in summer, but we are working closely with the City of Rochester, we are working closely with our CBOs to ensure that all students have some opportunity for acceleration, growth, experiences in the summertime. So when we say all students, we mean all students, not necessarily in programming that we're delivering, but some opportunities in the summer. So this year, as a group, we set some goals for ourselves, and I just kind of want to share where we are with those goals and what they were. So the first one was students, this is for elementary students, we wanted them to show growth, statistically significant growth against students who did not attend summer. So that's that iReady data, that window just closed, so we'll have that analysis soon. Credits earned. So our goal was that credits earned to the enrollment would be 0.75. Last year we were below that level, and this year we met that goal. We ended up at 1.29 credits per student who attended summer school. And so that's for grades 9 to 12. The third goal on here was that the August Regents passing rate would surpass the rate of June Regents. I'm always optimistic that we have to have high expectations for our students and ourselves. This one, unfortunately, we did not meet this goal, but there's a little asterisk there because this does not include exemptions, which the state had an exemption this year for passing rate. It's usually 65. They made it 55 with an appeal process. Exemptions weren't in our data so far. We haven't had those appeals granted or not granted yet, so that those rates will probably increase. Also, with those exemptions, there's a lot of students who typically would have attended summer school that did not because they passed based on that exemption that the state gave. All right, next, a little too far. Next set of goals was we really wanted to have a 75% daily attendance rate for summer. We did not hit that for average daily attendance. In fact, we stayed about the same over the past 3 years at 62%. We do have, I'll go into a little more detail later on, so we did have some programs that hit that, and some that fell below it, but we didn't hit that as a goal for the summer. And by August 2022, each summer learning instructor will receive feedback from a walkthrough focused on culture of learning, engagement levels of the students. So this was a brand new process that we started this year. Instructor feedback has not been really a part of summer programming in recent years. So I have a TBD here because as far as data collection, all those details aren't necessarily worked out. We have to work with, how are we, it's got to be non-evaluative. This is feedback around instruction, so we want to make sure that we provide that. Whether every teacher got that this summer, I can't say with 100% accuracy, so I don't want to claim that we did. By August 2022, 90% of our families and students will indicate an engaging experience. So with the help of our accountability department, we were able to put out a pretty extensive survey, and judging on answers that were agree and strongly agree, we definitely hit that mark. And then our final goal is around acceleration. And so while we were still at home, I remember presenting to this board a couple of years ago about summer and where we stand and where we want to go. And acceleration is really the path that we want to take. It's a path that we believe brings us to equity and opportunities for our students. And so this goal was 25% of all credits for grades 9 through 12 will be initial credits, first-time courses. We have traditionally in the past been about 90% or higher for credits being just recovery. And I will say that we still are in a system that is built for credit recovery in summer. So that's one of the things that we're really trying to move. We don't know if we hit this goal yet because it's difficult to figure out whether this was the first time a student took this class or not. And I think that speaks to our larger problem, our systemic issue that we are built for credit recovery rather than initial credits. Other examples, I mean, when we register for summer, we register for high school summer courses right after the regents have been scored in June. We got like a 3-day window where we can register everybody who needs courses. Now, in my opinion, that another example of a system that's set up for credit recovery. To me, it feels like 90% of our courses should already be enrolled, and then when we find out who needs to take some more because of their regents, we can add them, right? Not the other way around. So it's something that we're working towards and trying to disrupt a system that's been built a certain way. And so this year we were hoping for 25% of initial credit, next year 50%, and then, you know, I would like to see 75% in 2 years. So that's just kind of where we're heading with that. All right, attendance. So here's some data from this year, very high level. We had about 80% of students that enrolled attended at least one day, so our no-show rate was about 20%. That is a little bit different than in the past. It's better than it has been in the past, but of course we don't want to waste any resources when we're planning for summer. The attendance rate for the programs was 62.74, really about the same over the past 3 years. And then again, attendance varied greatly. So I will tell you some trends. CBOs definitely had the highest attendance rates. There were a couple CBOs that had some difficulty taking attendance, so we don't have every CBO's rates. We're working through that and with Power School. But CBOs had high attendance rates. They also have smaller programs. Centralized programs, here's another trend that was interesting. Our centralized programs, meaning our St. John Fisher program, we had a commencement site at School of the Arts. Our summer program for elementary, which was housed at School 12 this year, they all had higher attendance rates than our school-based programs. So the schools that hosted their own had lower attendance than our centralized programs, which is kind of surprising to me. And then some of our programs, like 35%, that actually represented School Without Walls, and that's kind of an unfair statistic because their program is based on individual students. They don't need to be there every day. They come to get support with their PBATs. But the way we calculate things in Power School, it looks like they had low attendance. So I just want to clarify some of those pieces. Budget. So we ended up with a total cost for summer. Currently, what I received from the budget department, $11,500,000, almost $600,000. That includes the $6.2 million for extended school year. So it puts us at just over $5 million for non-ESY students. And if you take out kind of the ESY students and that ESY budget, it brings us to about $1,300 per student. And just to put that in context, so in 2009, the Wallace Foundation did a study and they found summer programming cost for 6-week programs cost about between $1,100 and $2,800 per student, and that was 13 years ago. And then just last April, New York City had a campaign for charter schools to run summer schools, and they were allowing $2,000 per student for that, for those programs. So just wanted to put that in context. I feel like $1,300 is reasonable given where other programs are. Commencement programming. This data I just wanted to share it because this is the kind of data that we're collecting to help us continuously improve. So what we see here is that statistically significant difference between females and males. Females outperform males in summer. As far as subgroups, our African American, Hispanic, and white subgroups pretty much all performed the same. There was no variance there that was statistically significant. But we are still struggling to provide appropriate supports for our L students and our students with disabilities. So as we go back and we do our continuous improvement process, we're definitely going to be looking at how we can serve those students better in the future. This is just some additional information about who was attending summer school. So you can see here that we have 10th graders signed up for a lot of classes. They had high enrollment levels, but really that 11th and 12th graders are the ones who made the most of the courses they signed up for with the highest credits earned percentages. And I think that speaks to, one, people getting a little more serious as they get older and on in their educational careers, as well as the program that we had at St. John Fisher this year, where we did house all of our 11th and 12th graders. So that was an exciting program. And so here's just another statistic about the commencement programs. If you stick with me for a second, so we had 606 students who signed up in grades 9 through 12 who were off track to graduate based on credit accumulation. By the end of the summer, that number was 248 students less than at the beginning of the summer. So about 41% of students who were off track were on track by the end of the summer. There's a lot that goes into that, because how off track were they? How close were they? Those kinds of things. We don't have all of that, but this is a data point that we can use to grow on. So we really want to get students on track. And, just some additional quotes from our survey participants. We had a student who just was talking about St. John Fisher and how the campus itself is relaxing, and just being in that environment was helpful. Helped getting ready for my senior year, and it was fun. Parents talking about how prepared the programming was for them. And the sports camps were a big hit this summer and popular. So we look at all of this data to help us improve for the future. ESY, here's just some kind of the numbers around ESY as far as how many students were there, how many classes. I know that it's embargoed, so I'm not going to give any numbers, but I do believe there was an increase in graduate rate for special ed students based on the work that happened this summer. Pretty significant increase. So, they do an amazing job with the programming for students there. I got to see a lot of it this summer. So that's kind of the end, but before I go, I just want some highlights from this summer. St. John Fisher program was great. Principal Rodriguez, I think, even got an award from St. John Fisher as an alum for the work that he did there this summer leading that program. We had Special Olympics, which I know many of you saw the videos of. We had students who were writing books in our middle school program, and those books were published, and the student receives a copy, and then they're allowed to provide a copy to their local library or their school library. We had also a middle school program that was through a General Motors grant that helped us do some really hands-on science with middle school students. And we have been invited to present at the National Summer Learning Association Conference in 2 weeks in Washington, D.C., to talk about how we are moving from remediation to acceleration in our summer programming. Lessons learned this summer, lots of them, as always. Number one is payroll, contracts, clerical support. So we were without clerical support this summer, and man, it hurt us as far as making sure that we get all of those ducks in a row. So there's something that we learned there for sure. Professional learning, I think more professional learning throughout the school year for summer instructors is something that we need to look at. Just giving a couple days before summer starts just doesn't feel like enough. Next steps, so we've got more data to collect around iReady and looking at those initial credits. How are we going to build year-long PD for next summer? We're really looking at some of the parent comments, like as far as what the needs are. Could we build a multi-age campus for summer where whole families could go and attend together? Like those kinds of things come up in the comments. And then, we're always looking at everything through an equity lens and ensuring that we have opportunities across the city, across our zones for students to engage in summer.
Thank you so
Yes.
much. So I'm going to open up for questions and comments at this particular time. I wanted to jump right in. I wanted to acknowledge something you said on slide number 6, which was focused on attainment. And I like the conversation around disrupting a system built on credit recovery versus attainment. So I would love to see the actions that'll happen that will show that we are moving towards credit attainment and expectations, and that's what it's about, raising our expectations around our scholars. So I'm excited to hear more about what that's going to look like. I had another question for slide number 9, I think I'm looking at, and this was where you broke down by subgroup: male, black students, white students, Hispanic, and then we recognized that we weren't able to make a dent in our special education ELL pieces, those type of things. Do you have the actual data for that, or when do you think that is going to be available?
Yeah, so this is kind of a summarizing from the big report, and so you'll be getting that report. I know that in the academic plan, the ESA committee will be getting a copy of that full report. We're just kind of waiting on that iReady piece.
Right.
We can give you what we have so far if you're interested, but it does break down those.
Okay, so we're talking November for that as well, next month?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I think lastly, I had a question. You said there were 606 students enrolled, and I know you said something about like 248.
Yeah.
Now, of the 606 enrolled, because I know numbers are, can be subjective sometimes, how many students actually attended summer school?
Okay. So I'll tell you. So that number was just high school students who were off track.
Okay.
That enrolled.
Okay.
Total, we had served 4,478 students.
Say that number again?
4,478, which is about 18% of our total enrollment in the district.
And of the 4,478 students that were enrolled in summer school, how many attended?
So that's the number that attended at least one day. And that's kind of how so yeah, we didn't count, like, that's the number of students that we served.
Okay.
So the enrollment was higher. There was about 20% of no-shows. So enrollment was actually higher than that. But that's the number of students that we actually served, we saw in schools.
Okay. And so you said, for example, that 4,000, let me go back and make sure I say it right, 4,478 students, that's an example of students who attended maybe at least one day. And so then do you have it broken down, X amount of students attended at least 2 days, at least 3 days, and, and so on, or?
So the 1 day mark really helps us identify the no-shows, the no-show rate. Beyond that, we have our average daily attendance, which is broken down by each program, and that's in the bigger report as well.
That the SE report?
Yeah.
I tried to click on the link and it wouldn't open, it took me to like a Gmail.
That report, that's just for extended school year.
Gotcha, okay.
This is what you'll be getting.
That's what okay, gotcha. Thank you so very much. Yeah. I'm going to start at the other end of the dais at this time. Commissioner Patterson, any questions or comments?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Powell?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. President Elliott?
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. So my concern is that if we have a attendance rate at the level that we have, and I don't know how many students attended just one day, my concern is the financial impact and how can we reduce the cost if the attendance rate is low. So that's what I would be looking at, Dr. Palouse, so that and I think that over the years, we've had issues with attendance. And so I would argue that we should not be putting the kind of money that we're putting into summer school if students are not attending. And it does seem as if with some of the other programs that they were pretty well attended, like St. John Fisher and some of the others, but those programs that are within our schools or in our district doesn't seem to be getting the kind of bang for the buck. And so I'm going to ask that we revisit how we design our summer program because it seems to be costing us more than we're getting the rate of return on, if you will. And I like to use the academic rate of return. And so I'm going to ask that that be looked at as we move forward for planning for our summer school for 2023. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I would like to respond. I think as we move towards an acceleration model, attendance increases because that's where kids are, we're saying, here's some opportunities for you this summer. Here's what are you interested in? What do you want to accelerate your learning in? And that's motivation to go rather than that remediation model of, I got to go to summer school because I failed this and I'm going to get the same content that I had all year and I didn't do well in, right? So I think that as we see that shift happen, we will also see attendance increase.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go.
Commissioner LeBron?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, I'm with you on this, President Elliott. I actually wrote down budget, just so you know, in the past, we've actually gotten a more comprehensive expense budget analysis of the cost of summer school that included attendance, how many students attended, how many staff were employed on a daily, and then also by like program or school, because when it's all kind of clumped like this together, for example, the attendance slide, it doesn't really tell me a lot. I can get a little snapshot, but 79.35% of all students that registered and attended one day, I was like, a day, what is a day gonna do for a student that may need the credits, right? And then what are we doing in response to that? You know, I've heard different responses from different superintendents and administration, like when the kids are not coming, then the staff's role shift to calling and doing outreach, and I don't even know if any of that's true, because I've worked summer school in the district before, and I could tell you, I just saw a bunch of, in some places, I did see a bunch of adults doing nothing because kids didn't show up, and they had a job, and they were just gonna stick it out to the end because there was no actual chewing up, if you will. And then on the other hand, you have programs that are well-loved, well-attended, right? And then you have that educator. And this is that inequity that we've created across the district too, because people talk to each other. And it's like really not fair that we're both getting paid to do a job and I have 20 kids and you only got 3 or 1, and you're still allowed to just have 1 student versus merging your 1 with me and working collaboratively. So I would like to see some possibilities of that. But I did put it down because I am going to request under finance that we pull out the budget analysis for summer school and go over it through the finance with a little bit greater detail like we've done in the past to understand what the cost has been prior to and the growth of that cost. I don't recall if you were here, but there was one summer where we were under budgeted and overspent for a summer school year, which contributed to part of the deficit as well. So just want to be real mindful of that piece and have a greater understanding of the cost and the outcomes. I'm also curious about when we're going to actually get a more comprehensive data. I heard you mention ESA committee, but all commissioners should be getting that report, and just understanding if we'll have an opportunity to digest that and have an actual conversation with all of the data versus snapshots. And then lastly, I do have to say that this has been a pet peeve of mine forever, but I'm gonna hone in on it right now for summer school because it came up this summer with Fisher's contract, is that all contracts really should be in place and all vendors should know like what the process is for billing and payroll and so forth by July 1st. Because we end our fiscal year at the end of June. By July 1, we're in a new fiscal year. Everybody should be in place versus waiting, because if you know we have a 2-month resolution process and then contracts goes through a process in legal, and then there's a process for the administration to sign off, and there's all these processes and checks and balances, really, and I get it, there's a checks and balance, and it takes time. So if that's gonna be the case, and that's what we're following, then clearly we have to start it much sooner rather than later, because then we're up against those deadlines, and then we're trying to build relationships with folks who then don't want to have relationships with us, not because of the behavior of our children, but the behavior of the adults not meeting the contracts and getting them implemented. And I just want to say thank you for acknowledging that clerks and other support positions that were perhaps missing played a vital role. Because, yep, I got those phone calls from people who were not getting paid, didn't know when they were going to get paid because there were glitches. And it was like, who's going to handle this piece? And it's one of those things, you think people could do it, but it really did require some additional support. So thank you for acknowledging that and for them as well. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just respond. So we did establish a staff reduction policy that we implemented a little bit this year. The pushback, is always tough. But I think so one of the things moving forward is having each of our summer employees understand that policy before we make an agreement with them, so that people know and where those reductions come from. So we have to work with the unions on that. But just that is something that we have established or trying to establish to help with some of those budget issues.
Commissioner Malloy?
Thank you. First and foremost, Dan, thank you for your presentation. I really want to uplift what Commissioner Simmons was talking about in terms of the quote that you had earlier, just that we're built for credit recovery rather than initial credit. I think that's been a problem in our system for a long time, and I'm glad that was brought up tonight, and hopefully the board can work together to help implement some changes. Silly question. On slide number 9, I'm not quite following the difference between group 1 and group 2, and if I missed that in the presentation, apologies. I didn't quite follow the differences.
Is that?
That's the slide, yeah. I just didn't know quite what I was looking at. If you could just maybe describe it.
Sure. So when we look at the in-person high school students and the credits that were resulted, so just looking at group 1 and group 2 would be just two groups that we compared, and here's the finding. So group 1, males and females, so females significantly outperformed males in attaining credits.
So all our males were in group 1?
Yeah.
Okay, all our females in group 2. All right.
Yeah. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
It's been a long day. Thank you.
But then when I'm looking at that, if all females were in group 2, we're looking at it in a column way, then we're...
Look at it across. So
across,
that row,
okay.
And then the next row compares African-American students and white students.
Okay.
There was no significant difference there.
Gotcha.
Like that.
Okay, I'm
And
gonna make
like
sure.
I said, this is kind of just that summary, quick, everything is in more detail here.
Okay, I'm gonna go to the Zoom, and Dr. Jallo, we have you.
Just one, yes, thank you. I wanted to know, will ESY data and information be included in the report, and when will the report be completed? And do you have any data about the high school? Because you're not waiting for iReady data for high school, so I'm wondering.
No, all of the high school data is ready to go. It's already in this report.
Okay.
So, I think.
So
Dr.
when's the
Black, can we
report
get
going to be
this
finished?
Whenever we want, or I'm gonna throw that to Dr. Black.
Because the report is due October 1st. So when do you think it might be done?
So we could provide a preliminary draft of the report by the end of the week, which has probably 2 data points, including budget and the comprehensive iReady comparison. That's outstanding, but we do have a draft ready to go, and we'll send it by the end of the week.
What's missing?
The
The
iReady.
comparison, iReady data, and some final budget numbers.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, I don't know if Commissioner Adams, if you're still on? No? Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions, or, looks like we're all set with that. Thank you, Mr. Hurley, for your presentation this
Thank you
evening. I do want to acknowledge from our previous presentation around receivership schools that Chief Strickland provided a handout. That particular handout will be available electronically on our board docs for the public. And it is titled Understanding the New York State Accountability System Under the Every Student Succeeds Act. This will be for the 2019-2020 accountability status based on the 2018-2019 results. So you can find that on board docs. I don't think we have need for executive session, so I believe this is going to conclude the ESA meeting for this evening. And before we close out, I would ask that all commissioners please take a moment to complete the board survey. And I'm going to turn the mic over to President Elliott, who will take us into our special meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner. So before we get into the special meeting, let's complete the survey for the ESA meeting. So has everybody completed the survey? Okay, they have, everybody has?
It's via Google, so I can't see yet.
Okay. Okay, well,
President
welcome.
Elliott, oh, I'm sorry, we do need an official motion to adjourn ESA.
Thank you, Ms. Nguyen. At this time, I would like to entertain a motion to.
Motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay. But that could, all in favor?
Aye.
We conclude
Aye.
ESA this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. So we'll start with the special meeting of resolutions. And so it looks like that there are no speakers for this special meeting. So we'll get right into the resolutions. And we will start with Resolution 147. Can I get a motion, please, for Resolution 147?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Malloy. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Simmons. Any questions or comments relating to Resolution 147? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And I'm going to need you all to say aye for the record.
Aye.
Yep, all right. Thank you. Is there a motion for Resolution 148?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Malloy. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Vice President LeBron. Any questions or comments relating to Resolution 148? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Is there a motion for Resolution 149?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Malloy. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Simmons. Any questions or comments related to Resolution 149?
President Elliott, I just
Vice
wanted
President?
to have our HR just kind of comment to the resolution itself in terms of contractual substitute and how one resolution is for a year, one is for 4 years. If you can just clarify as to how folks were selected for those two different pathways, if you will.
Sure. So Resolution 147, which you voted on, is with respect to appointing fully certified educators to a probationary period, which is generally a 4-year probationary period unless an individual teacher or educator has earned tenure previously, and with evidence of that prior tenure, the period probation can be reduced to 3 years. And so what you have with contract substitutes, it is a position within the Rochester Teachers Association collective bargaining agreement, and that's where we have been appointing folks who are not yet fully certified. Their certification could be pending with the state education department, or we're hiring them on an emergency basis to fulfill employment this school year, so it's just for the year. We do anticipate that most of these people will earn their certification, and that will help us because then next year we don't have to rehire them, although we will give them a probationary period. And if they're evaluated, the time served in the contract substitute would count as part of that probationary period.
Can I just as a quick follow-up then, and I know we're gonna have a HR preview, I'm just wondering if that could be part of a report that we do. We don't need to identify names, but, you know, even if we have like an ending number to identify folks, to say we've assessed and where folks are at, what their plan is, because I know you mentioned it before, but it wasn't clear who's getting what individual plan to get them to the next level for certification. So I'm okay, I'm going to support it, but I just wanted some clarification on it. But as we move forward, understanding that we should be monitoring this as well to have a greater understanding of where people are at, what their actual plan is, and if they're meeting their plan or not as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President. Any other questions regarding Resolution 149? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is there a motion for Resolution 150?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Malloy, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Simmons. Any questions or comments related to Resolution 150?
Yes.
Commissioner Malloy?
Are these new positions?
Good evening, Commissioner. So the Community School Site Coordinator position is not a new position. The other two positions as Projects Implementation Specialists are new grant-funded positions through CRSA or ARP to support the two locations that you see there. One is for the Chief of Schools, and the second is for the Office of Professional Learning.
Just a quick follow-up then. If they're partially funded by CRSA or ARP funds, how will we afford these funds once we no longer have these funds?
So some decisions will need to be made relative to sustainability and whether or not they will be sustained or not.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions relating to Resolution 150? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Is there a motion for Resolution 151?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Malloy, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Simmons. Any questions or comments related to Resolution 150? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Is there, can I get a motion for Resolution 152?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Malloy, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Simmons. Any questions or comments related to Resolution 152?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Powell?
it's not on this is a point of order, I guess. We're going at a pace where the electronic voting is only like every other vote, or at least I'm only seeing the window for every other vote.
It was
So-
open. I don't believe, I heard you verbally, but you didn't click.
I never saw it.
So do I need to go slower?
Maybe just a little bit to give folks more of a
All
time
right,
to respond.
sure will. Thank you for that, Commissioner Powell. So we're on Resolution 152 now, right?
Correct.
So I got a motion and a second, and so, did we vote on this one, or do we need to vote?
No, the
All
online
right.
voting is now open.
All right, okay. Now, I apologize for moving too quickly. Thank you, Commissioner Powell.
I have a question, Madam Chair,
Do you have a question on what?
relative
Which
to
one?
one of the resolutions.
Are we there yet,
Resolution
Commissioner Patterson?
152.
Which one do you have a question on? Which one do you have a question on?
I don't know exactly which one it was, but it was a question that was posed to the Director of HC relative to...
Yeah, we voted on that, so you may want to ask that question in the question log. We've moved on. So can I go to 153?
We're waiting on one more vote for
One more vote
resolution
for
152.
152? Do I need to vote?
No, Commissioner Patterson, if he could
Okay.
vote.
So do we have to take a verbal vote as well?
Yes.
Ross, President Elliott, you can take the verbal vote.
Say that again?
You can go ahead with the vote if you like.
For 152?
Yes, we didn't call it out. I don't believe folks voted verbally yet for that. We were waiting. Commissioner Powell asked a question about the online. We slowed it down.
For 151?
No, 152.
152, so we can vote on it now?
Yes, commissioners have electronically voted, but
Okay,
there's no verbal
so we
vote.
need a verbal vote. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Is there a motion for Resolution 153?
Motion.
Second.
Moved by Vice President LeBron, seconded by Commissioner Malloy. Any questions or comments related to Resolution 153? Vice President LeBron?
Yeah, I just want to uplift all the paraprofessionals that are listed on here, and kudos to HR for making that happen, primarily because we've had conversations around this role being filled through tests, and I get it, like we needed to have bodies in schools, but it is very much so more meaningful when they are our staff, trained by us and part of our system, and they can get to know our kids permanently. So I just want to give a kudos to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President LeBron. Any other questions or comments related to Resolution 153? So hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
And we'll wait for, has everybody did the electronic voting? I think I have.
For 154, I haven't seen it.
153, Commissioner.
Yes, everyone has.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion for Resolution 154?
Motion.
Second.
Moved by Vice President LeBron, seconded by who?
Commissioner Malloy.
Commissioner Malloy. All right, thank you. Any questions or comments related to Resolution 154?
Yes.
Vice President LeBron.
Yes, it would, first and foremost, I just want to thank Sean Walker for her years and years of service and dedication to the Rochester City School District and our children. She was also my daughter's assistant principal at School 15, and I know she was well loved at that school. And she leaves us a legacy with her son, and moving to the next generation in this district. But I just would be remiss if I just did not thank her from the bottom of my heart for just her years of service. So thank you, Ms. Walker, and I hope that you're doing well health-wise and that retirement is good for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President. And the board sends those same sentiments from Vice President LeBron. We do wish you well. I have a motion and I have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So we'll wait for the online voting to
You all
appear?
voted for online already.
We voted for that? Okay, thank you. Is there a motion for Resolution 155?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Malloy. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Simmons. Any questions or comments related to Resolutions 155?
Yes, ma'am.
Who was that?
Over here.
Commissioner Malloy? Excuse me, Commissioner Powell?
Could HCI, for the question log, please, give us a total number of each of these resignations according to their reason for resigning? This is quite a long list, and I think it would be helpful to know what reasons were given. I don't want to know by name, just, in a summary list of some kind.
Thank you, Commissioner. Those are provided in the executive content only viewable to the board, or it should be there in the executive content. I'll forward that.
I don't see it. I mean, I know, because I'm logged in, I should be able to see it, and it's not there, so,
Okay, I will share that. Thank you.
thank you, appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments related to Resolution 155? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So have we done the online voting for this, Rahima, yet? Oh, here it
Commissioners
comes.
are beginning to do it, but I can, since you did it verbally, I can take it manually.
No, we got it, I've got it here
You
at
got it?
least.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Is there a motion for Resolution 156?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Malloy, is there a second?
Second?
Seconded by Commissioner Simmons. Any questions or comments related to Resolution 156? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And we'll wait for the online voting.
We're all set with the online voting.
Thank you. Is there a motion for Resolution 157?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Malloy, is seconded by Commissioner Simmons. Any questions or comments related to Resolution 157? Is that the right resolution? Am I on 150? Yes.
You are.
Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
We're all set with online voting.
Thank you. Is there a motion for Resolution 158?
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Commissioner Malloy, seconded by Commissioner Simmons. Any questions or comments related to Resolution 158? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Vice President LeBron. Thank you.
Thank you, that's all right.
We're all set.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion for Resolution 159?
So moved.
Second?
Any questions or comments related to Resolution 159? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And so we'll wait for the online voting.
Online voting is complete.
All right, thank you. Can I get a motion to go into executive session to discuss pending litigation and matters leading to the employment of a particular person or corporation?
So moved?
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Good night. We're going to be adjourning the meeting from downstairs, so thank you for joining us, and we look forward to you joining us in the future. Have a good evening.